Love can be shattered like a vase, but the shards always remember the hands that held it. His plan was perfect until her signature appeared. Don't look away. The final scene will change everything you believed about revenge. The collapse began not with a bang, but with the quiet persistence of water eroding stone. For 17 years, I built my life around two constants: the weight of a hammer in my calloused hands and Clara's voice weaving through our home like a familiar song. We met during a summer storm. She'd taken shelter under the awning of a job site where I was framing a Victorian revival. Her laughter cut through the drumming rain, sharp and bright, and I'd offered her my spare hard hat like a fool. By autumn, we were married in that same unfinished house, her grandmother's lace veil clashing wonderfully with my steel-toed boots. Time sanded our edges smooth. Clara traded her paint-splattered jeans for linen blouses and a marketing career, while I rose from crew chief to managing entire subdivisions. We planted hydrangeas along the porch, adopted a rescue mutt named Bricks, and buried 3 miscarriages in the quiet corners of our hearts. Routine became our sanctuary. Sunday pancakes, her cold feet pressed against my calves in bed, the way she'd hum Sinatra while folding laundry. I mistook comfort for permanence. The first Fisher appeared on a Thursday evening in March. Clara had started working late twice a week, client dinners she claimed, but returned without the scent of restaurant smoke clinging to her clothes. Instead, her skin carried traces of bergamot and vetiver, a cologne as foreign as the distance in her eyes. She'd begun sleeping turned away from me, her body curved like a parenthesis around secrets. I told myself it was stress. The human mind, I've learned, will contort itself into impossible shapes to avoid truths that crack foundations. It was Bricks who forced my hand. Old and arthritic, he'd taken to sleeping in Clara's car, seeking warmth from the garage heater. When I carried him inside one evening, a receipt fluttered from the driver's seat, a $450 charge from the Marlowe, a boutique hotel downtown. The date stamped on the paper matched a team-building retreat she described weeks earlier with elaborate detail. Trust falls, motivational speakers, a raffle she'd supposedly won. My fingers traced the embossed logo, imagining velvet drapes and silk sheets, until the numbers blurred. I became an archaeologist of our own demise. Late nights at the office became cover for stakeouts outside the Marlowe's Art Deco facade. I memorized the valet's shifts, the rhythm of its clientele, affairs conducted with the efficiency of board meetings. On the third evening, she emerged arm in arm with a man whose cashmere coat cost more than my truck. He guided her to a black Lexus with a hand on the small of her back, a gesture too intimate for colleagues. I followed them to a dimly lit bistro, watched through rain-streaked windows as she laughed at jokes I'd never hear, her fingers brushing his wrist with a familiarity that turned my coffee bitter. His identity came via a forgotten coffee cup. Clara had always despised Starbucks, yet there it was in her cup holder, half-finished latte under the name Daniel. A search of her LinkedIn revealed Daniel Hartman, corporate attorney, board member of the symphony, owner of a Rolex that glinted in his profile photo like a challenge. I printed his face and taped it inside my toolbox, a reminder that some men build with paper and lies instead of timber and nails. Clara's deception took on architectural precision. She bought lingerie, black lace, not the practical cotton she'd worn for years, and left it accidentally visible in the laundry basket. She praised my patience, my loyalty, words that now curdled like milk in the sun. I played my part, smiling through dinners where she dissected Daniel's brilliant takes on Hemingway, all while redirecting funds from our joint account. Every dollar I'd hammered into subdivisions now fueled a silent rebellion. The full blueprint of her betrayal arrived via a storm drain. During a weekend downpour, Clara's convertible flooded, the passenger floorboard pooling with murky water. As I pulled up the soaked mat, a burner phone slid free, sealed in a Ziploc bag, a cliché she'd likely learned from thrillers. Its messages were a knife to the ribs. Selfies of them tangled in hotel sheets, plans to meet in Aspen, a promise from Daniel to leave his wife once her inheritance cleared probate. I photographed each thread, each digital fingerprint, before sealing the phone back in its plastic tomb. That night, I drove to my latest project, a luxury high-rise overlooking the bay. From the 42nd floor, the city stretched like a circuit board, indifferent to the chaos sparking in its grids. In my toolbox beside Daniel's photo lay a vial of sand from our honeymoon in Tulum. Two artifacts of a life I'd mistaken for solid ground. Revenge, I realized, wouldn't be a wrecking ball. It would be termites. Silent, patient, reducing their world to dust from within. Clara's garden, her pride, her therapy became my first target. She'd spent years nurturing roses named after dead poets, their petals blushing like bruised skin. I studied their care with grotesque devotion, learning which fertilizers nourished and which corroded. When she left to visit her sister, I injected glyphosate into the soil, picturing roots withering like veins. By dawn, the leaves yellowed at the edges, a sickness she blamed on aphids and climate change. Her grief was a masterpiece. She knelt in the dirt for hours, gloves caked in mulch, whispering to dying buds like a mother at a cribside. I watched from the kitchen window, sipping bourbon, and wondered if Daniel's hands had ever touched soil. The final piece fell into place at 2:37 a.m. Clara's laptop, left open on the couch, pulsed with a notification from her cloud storage. A folder labeled Renovation Ideas had spreadsheets of joint accounts, screenshots of Swiss chalets, and a draft email to a divorce attorney. Jason is a good man, but painfully simple. He'll never suspect. I printed every page. The laser jets hum a funeral dirge. In the garage, bricks whined at my feet as I fed the documents into a lockbox alongside Daniel's photo and the Marlowe receipt. The dog's milky eyes seemed to ask why the air smelled of smoke when nothing burned. By sunrise, I drafted my own blueprint, a cabin in the Rockies purchased through an LLC named after Clara's childhood street. Every embezzled dollar became a log in its walls, a nail in its bones. I framed the deed next to our wedding portrait, two versions of a future colliding. When Clara awoke, I made her blueberry pancakes her favorite and memorized the crinkle of her smile. Some lies are tender. The best weapons, I've learned, are those your enemy never sees coming. Revenge, I discovered, thrived in the mundane. I became a curator of invisible chaos, each act a brushstroke too faint to notice until the portrait revealed itself. Clara's garden, now a graveyard of brittle stems, served as both warning and rehearsal. Her tears, over-wilted, Auden roses tasted sweeter than morning coffee. Daniel Hartman's destruction demanded nuance. Corporate lawyers orbit in ecosystems of reputation, their power brittle as antique glass. I began with his calendar, gleaned from Clara's carelessly left iPad. Board meetings, charity galas, weekends at a Napa vineyard, patterns emerged like cracks in concrete. A forged email to his firm's HR department, sent from a disposable account, alleged inappropriate client gifts during a recent merger. The syntax mimicked a junior associate's nervous prose, dotted with typos only a guilty man would overlook. His downfall unfolded in increments. A missed promotion, whispered rumors at the country club, a partnership vote postponed indefinitely. Clara fretted over his sudden stress, her texts to him growing frantic. I watched her thumb hover over his contact, her reflection in the bedroom mirror a masterpiece of fraying composure. The Lexus became my compass. On Thursdays, while Clara attended yoga classes she'd never mentioned before, I tailed Daniel to a discreet parking garage near the courthouse. His mistress, a sharp-jawed paralegal half his age, met him in stairwell B, her laughter echoing off concrete like a struck bell. I documented their trysts with the dispassion of a surveyor mapping fault lines. The photos arrived at Mrs. Hartman's tennis club in a gilded envelope, anonymized but irrefutable. By sundown, Daniel's Instagram transformed into a mausoleum of deleted family portraits. Clara's confusion was a drug. She bought self-help books, booked a weekend spa retreat, and began sleeping facing me again, her arms slung over my waist like a fallen power line. I kissed her forehead each morning, my lips grazing skin that smelled of another man's lies, and savored the rot beneath her perfume. The financial web took longer to spin. Our joint account, once fat with equity from flipped properties, now bled funds into shadow accounts. Fake invoices for HVAC repairs, a phantom roofing contractor, overpaid taxes, accidentally refunded to an offshore number. Every transaction, a thread in a tapestry only I could see. The cabin in the Rockies grew teeth. Solar panels, a wine cellar, a security system keyed to my fingerprints alone. I framed its blueprints in the garage, behind a poster of the Eiffel Tower we'd bought on our 5th anniversary. Brix's death nearly unraveled me. The old dog collapsed in the ruined garden one October dusk, his muzzle flecked with foam. Clara knelt in the dirt, screaming for help that wouldn't come, while I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. For a heartbeat, I considered mercy, a rush to the vet, prayers to indifferent gods. But the lesson needed completion. I let her cradle him, her sobs shaking the hydrangeas, and remembered the vial of Tulum sand burning in my pocket. Her grief became a weapon. She stopped wearing Daniel's gifted necklace, abandoned her perfume, and took to sleeping on the couch. I stocked the freezer with her favorite mint chip ice cream and reread The Count of Monte Cristo at the kitchen table, its margins filled with notes she'd never decipher. The final stroke came from her own vanity. Clara's cloud storage, synced to the laptop I'd gifted her last Christmas, hid a folder labeled Fresh Start. Inside, scanned passports, a prenuptial agreement draft, screenshots of my text messages edited to paint me as volatile. She'd even saved screenshots of Daniel's promises, we'll build a real life, not this cardboard cutout marriage. I printed them on archival paper, the ink glossy as poison, and bound them with twine from our wedding gift boxes. The package waited on her Audi's passenger seat, crowned with a single dead rose from the garden. That night, I slept at the construction site, the city's skyline flickering like a failed heartbeat. When I returned, she was gone. The house hummed with absence, the fridge emptied of her kombucha, the closet stripped of linen blouses. On the kitchen island, she'd left her engagement ring coiled in the belly of a crystal vase, a snake shedding its skin. I poured bourbon into the vase, watched the diamond fracture light into prismatic shards, and toasted the hollow air. Some silences, once broken, can never be mended. The cabin's deed burned in my pocket, its edges charred but legible. Daniel's LinkedIn now listed him as seeking opportunities, his profile photo cropped to hide the absence of a wedding band. Clara's last text arrived as I packed my tools. "You win." I deleted it, fed the dead rose to the wood chipper, and began drafting a Craigslist ad for the house. Revenge, I realized, wasn't an end, it was the foundation for something wilder, a life built on the bones of borrowed dreams. The Rockies awaited, their peaks sharp as unanswered questions. The Rockies swallowed me whole. Winter came early that year, the first snowfall dusting the cabin's cedar shingles like powdered sugar. I'd chosen the location for its isolation, a valley carved by glaciers, accessible only by a logging road even GPS forgot. The nearest town, a cluster of clapboard buildings named Silver Hollow, sold kerosene and canned beans but no answers. Perfect. Clara's absence followed me like a phantom limb. In weak moments, I'd catch myself reaching for her coffee mug in the cupboard or listening for the click of her heels on hardwood. But the cabin tolerated no ghosts. Its floors creaked with the weight of my solitude, its stone fireplace devouring birch logs with a hunger that mirrored my own. I painted the walls the color of storm clouds and let the silence harden into armor. Daniel's ruin arrived via a crumpled newspaper left at the general store. Page 5 detailed his disbarment, ethics violations, misuse of client funds, a scandal involving a judge's niece. His photo, once smug in a tailored suit, now showed a man hunched beneath courtroom fluorescence. I pinned the article to the corkboard above my desk beside blueprints for the cabin's expansion. Progress reports, of a sort. Clara chose invisibility. Her Instagram, once a curated gallery of brunches and sunsets, went dark. Mutual friends mentioned a move to Phoenix, a job at a startup selling artisanal candles. When the divorce papers arrived, signed with a trembling signature, I mailed her a single item. The dead rose from her garden, pressed between sheets of legal parchment. No note. Let her parse the symbolism. The cabin became my cathedral. I built a greenhouse from salvaged windows, nurturing orchids in the thin mountain air. Their roots clung to bark and moss, indifferent to the frost gnawing at the glass. At night, I'd sit among them, the vial of Tulum sand warm in my palm, and replay our honeymoon, the sting of salt water on sunburned shoulders, her hair streaked with sunlight. The memory no longer cut, it had cauterized. Daniel's final act of self-destruction came in spring. A news alert on my satellite phone, a single-car crash on Pacific Coast Highway, Lexus wrapped around a eucalyptus tree. No alcohol in his system, just a text sent 3 minutes prior. I can't see the point anymore. The article included a stock photo of him laughing at a charity gala, teeth gleaming like tombstones. I burned the printout in the wood stove, the flames blew at the edges. Clara surfaced in July. A letter arrived, postmarked Santa Fe, her handwriting slanted as if written in a moving vehicle. "I dream about the roses," she wrote. "Sometimes I'm digging them up, sometimes they're growing through my ribs." She asked no questions, offered no apologies. I fed the pages to the orchids, their petals trembling in the stove's updraft. The cabin's isolation bred clarity. I took up stone carving, chiseling granite into abstract shapes that mirrored the skyline's jagged teeth. My hands, once raw from power tools, grew smooth. Neighbors, if you could call the reclusive trapper and his wolf dog neighbors, left smoked venison on my porch. I paid them in whiskey and silence. On the anniversary of Brix's death, I hiked to a ridgeline dotted with bristlecone pines. The oldest had survived millennia of droughts and avalanches. Its trunk spiraled like a fossilized hurricane. I buried the vial of sand at its base, the grain slipping through my fingers like expired time. Wind screamed through the pass, carrying the scent of distant wildfires. Winter returned, harsher now. The trapper vanished, his cabin door left ajar, a half-eaten stew moldering on the stove. I stockpiled firewood, repaired the greenhouse's cracked panes, and waited. The first storm buried the valley under 7 feet of snow, the silence so absolute it hummed. Clara's final letter arrived as the thaw began. A Polaroid slipped out, a newborn swaddled in hospital linen, eyes squinted against fluorescent lights. His name is Asher, she wrote. He has your hands. The postscript trembled. Forgive me. I studied the photo under a magnifying glass. The child's fingers, stubby and curled, bore no resemblance to mine. But cruelty, I'd learned, thrives in ambiguity. I mailed the Polaroid to Daniel's widow with a forged note. Some questions outlive their answers. Let her dissect the math of conception dates and divorce filings. The orchids bloomed in May, their petals veined with crimson. I sold the cabin to a tech billionaire seeking a digital detox, the profit funneled into a nomadic fund, a sailboat in Greece, a converted van prowling Patagonia. The new owner asked why I'd built such a precise life, only to abandon it. I handed him the keys and pointed to the bristlecone pines. Roots are overrated, I said. Last week, hiking the Appalachian Trail, I passed a couple arguing over a snapped tent pole. The woman's laugh, sharp, bright, edged with frustration, stopped me cold. For a heartbeat, I smelled gardenias and glyphosate. Then the wind shifted, carrying the tang of pine resin, and the moment dissolved. Revenge, I've come to understand, isn't a destination. It's the compass that guides you to deeper truths. Clara lives in the click of a rotating fan, the hiss of a kettle, the way strangers sometimes tilt their heads when lying. Daniel lives in every obituary I skim, every Lexus that glides through a parking lot. But the cabin remains solid as a scar. Its new owner emails photos, sometimes solar panels gleaming, orchids strangling the greenhouse, a wolf dog napping on the porch. I delete them unread. Some fires burn cleanest when untended. I keep the vial's burial coordinates tattooed on my ribs, a reminder that even sand can become stone under enough pressure. The mountains taught me this. Destruction and creation are siblings, not strangers. Build. Burn. Repeat. The road ahead unwinds, a serpent eating its tail. I walk it without maps, my pockets empty of roses. One story may be ending, but the excitement never stops. Don't wait. Jump right into the next one and keep the thrill alive.